Here in this primitive river bottom wilderness in southern Arkansas, along with deer, duck, crane, and beaver, lurks a creature that walks upright. Whether it is a man, a monster, or a myth, no one really knows. What we do know is the people around Fouke, Arkansas say they have seen such a creature nearly 250 times since 1954. And that this creature, whatever it is, emits one of the most terrifying sounds ever recorded.
Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?
My dog went flying through the air over the tree, and I don't know how it did it.
Okay.
Deep in Bigfoot territory. Episode 18, The Legend of Boggy Creek. This is a Squatch Mafia documentary. Welcome to this episode of Bigfoot territory. Today we are going to travel into the swamps of southwestern Arkansas, into Miller County, where one of the most legendary cases of cryptozoology in American history emerged from the black waters of the bayous. The small village of Fouke and its most famous resident, the Fouke monster, came to nationwide fame and notoriety in the early 70s, as the docudrama The Legend of Boggy Creek became one of the most successful movies of 1972. The film was made on a $160,000 budget and earned over $20 million at the box office. The audience saw a previously unknown mix of documentary and horror film, shot on location in and around Fouke. The film featured many interviews with local witnesses and showed the locals reenacting encounters with the monster that had happened to them months or just weeks before. Hundreds of thousands of fascinated viewers learned about the strange saga from the southern swamps of Miller County and the small village of Fouke, which was terrorized by the monster. The legend of Boggy Creek has remained a cinematic phenomenon through the decades. But the forests and swamps of southern Arkansas, Oklahoma, and East Texas were already haunted by legends and sightings of large monkey or gorilla-like creatures for over 120 years, beginning around 1850, when the first white settlers entered the area. Today, the region is known as a hotspot in the Bigfoot community, with places like the Ozark Mountains, the Ouachita National Forest, and the Big Thicket in East Texas. See the links in the video description for various other Bigfoot territory episodes from the region, like the Siege of Honobia, or the so-called Bigfoot War of 1855 from LeFlore County in Oklahoma. Before the first European settlers arrived, the region was sparsely populated. Only a few native tribes resided in the wider area. The Caddo tribe, who had some settlements in southern Arkansas and eastern Texas, is one of the few tribes that directly lived in the region. Other tribes, like the Osage, lived in the lands which would later become Arkansas, but avoided the southern swamps. Both tribes, the Caddo and the Osage, had numerous legends of monkey-like creatures that inhabited the deep swamps and forests of the region. The Osage spoke of a creature they called the Honga, which they believed to be a hair-covered giant, hostile to their tribe. After the first Indian treaties in the 1830s, more native tribes were pushed into the remote swamps and forests of the region. The ethnic cleansing, which today is known as the Trail of Tears, forced Cherokee, Choctaw, and other tribes out of their homelands in the east into the unpopulated regions of Oklahoma, East Texas, and southwestern Arkansas. From that time on, various stories and encounters with so-called wild men are well documented. From the 1850s to the 1870s, as more and more European settlers flooded the scene, a first wave of wildman encounters and attacks was documented in newspapers throughout the South and the Midwest. One of the first documented reports made by Europeans in the region comes from 1846, when the Baltimore Sun reported on wildman sightings in the swamps near Crowell's Ridge in Arkansas. Throughout the 1850s, many other reports from Arkansas followed, coming from St. Francis, Greene, and Poinsett counties. In 1851, the Memphis Inquirer reported on a wildman hunt in Arkansas, organized by local authorities Colonel David C. Cross and a Dr. Sullivan. See the links in the video description for a detailed Bigfoot territory episode on the wildman encounters in 1850s Arkansas and Oklahoma. The reports continued throughout the 1870s and 80s and into the early 20th century, with the first documented sighting of a large, hairy, gorilla-like creature coming from the swamps near Fouke in 1908. In 1916, a family encountered a hairy, upright walking creature on a camping trip near Boggy Creek. The creature was said to emit a foul smell and let out bone-chilling screams and cries, which scared the family away. Dozens of encounters were documented throughout the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. Reports coming from 1955 and 1964 state that an unknown creature had killed hunting dogs in the forests around Fouke. But still, at this point, these encounters were barely more than local legends from a remote region in the southwest corner of Arkansas, and the terror, which would make an entire area famous throughout the nation, was still nearly a decade away. In the 1960s, many stories and sightings of monsters or large gorilla-like beings were recorded in the small village of Jonesville, not far from Fouke, with a first encounter documented in 1955. The Jonesville monster was sighted at least a dozen times throughout the 1960s. In 1965, a 14-year-old boy was chased by a large hairy monster at dusk on a dirt road outside the village. In 1966, a school bus driver encountered the creature in the early morning hours outside of Jonesville. Reports of sightings of large chimps or gorillas continued in early 1970. But the Jonesville monster is not the only famous cryptid from the region. The swamps of Louisiana are also home to the Honey Island swamp monster, which, like the Fouke monster, is also described as a large, Bigfoot-like hominid. The first documented encounter with the Honey Island swamp monster dates back to 1963, reported by a man named Harlan Ford. Ford became a lifelong researcher of the monster. After his death in 1980, a reel of Super 8 film showing the creature was found among his belongings. You can find an In Search of episode with Leonard Nimoy on the Honey Island swamp monster and Harlan Ford at the Squatch Mafia Patreon channel. Another strange series of events, documented not too far from the swamps of Miller County, comes from the winter of 1970. In December of 1970, various raids on chicken coops at farms outside of El Reno in Oklahoma were documented. Similar cases were reported from the villages of Stillwater and McAllister. Various local newspapers wrote articles about the so-called El Reno Chicken Man as the incidents multiplied. In many cases, tracks were found, often described as those of a large primate. In one case, bloody handprints were found inside and outside of a chicken coop. The handprints were 7 inches long and 5 inches wide. Experts stated the handprints resembled those of a gorilla. The reports of the El Reno Chicken Man seemed to end in the spring of 1971. But the village of Fouke was, apart from the minor incidents in the first half of the 20th century, nearly unaffected by reports of monsters and cryptids. The small village in the southwest corner of Miller County was founded in 1890 and lies 20 miles south of Texarkana and 60 miles north of Shreveport, Louisiana. Miller County, which is divided from the rest of Arkansas by the Red River, had been a refuge for moonshiners and all sorts of outlaws since the mid-19th century, mainly because the borders to other states could be crossed in very short time. Boggy Creek, from which the 1972 movie got its name, is a small river west of Fouke and was the site of many encounters with the monster. In the evening hours of May 2, 1971, a Sunday, terror struck the small community of Fouke for the first time as the house of Bobby and Elizabeth Ford, a few minutes outside of the village near Highway 71, was attacked. According to the Ford family, a creature had approached the house and smashed a window next to the couch on which Elizabeth Ford was sleeping. Then, a large, hairy arm reached through the broken window and tried to grab the sleeping woman. Bobby Ford and his brother Don were able to chase the creature away from the window and then immediately opened fire on the creature from the front porch of the house. The creature tried to get into the house 2 more times and attacked Bobby Ford brutally before it finally backed off into the swamps and disappeared into the night. The men later stated that they believed to have hit the creature several times, but no traces of blood were found at the scene. The case was well documented. Police arrived at the house only minutes after the shooting and researched the wider area the next morning on horseback. Bobby Ford had to be treated in a hospital. He was diagnosed with a mild shock and several minor injuries. Police also noted damage to the siding of the house and the broken window, as well as scratch marks on the front porch. The family stated that they had heard strange noises from the swamps on the nights prior to the attack, but had not seen nor experienced anything hostile before. Various local newspapers documented the nocturnal attack widely. The Ford family left their house only a few days after the attack and never returned to the village. The Fouke monster had made its first terrifying appearance. In the following weeks, many more sightings were reported around Fouke, often along Boggy Creek and the Sulphur River bottoms, or road crossings and sightings along Highway 71. The Sulphur River bottoms are massive swamplands extending over many tens of thousands of acres into deep, boggy forests in the southwest corner of Arkansas and eastern Texas. The river bottoms are a vast network of waterways and marshlands, and some say areas deep in the bottoms have yet to be explored by humans. The only permanent residents of the swamps seem to be fish, mosquitoes, and alligators. The sheer size, inaccessibility, and remoteness of these swamplands make it easy to believe that a cryptid, Bigfoot-like being could live in this uninhabited and desolate wilderness. The Sulphur River bottoms, like Boggy Creek itself, lie southwest of Fouke and have been the scene of many sightings of the monster through the decades, mostly by hunters and fishermen. Some theories suggest that sightings of the monster increase in years when the swamps and river bottoms of the region experience flooding. In drought years, encounters with the monster are rarely reported. This suggests that high water could drive the creature out of the inner swamps in search of food. The next violent event occurred along a small branch of Boggy Creek at the property of the Searcy family. The family lived in a remote house in the forests outside of Fouke, without a phone, and with the nearest neighbors miles away across the woods. One evening, Mary Beth Searcy, the youngest daughter of the family, saw a large and grotesque-looking hairy being emerging from the tree line next to the property and walking towards the house. The only residents of the house that night were 3 women and a newborn baby, so this time, no shots were fired at the monster. The women tried to barricade the house and fearfully watched outside the windows as the monster began to break into the chicken coops on the property. This time, the monster did not try to enter the house, but instead killed a large number of livestock in the yard outside the house, including the family's cat. After a few hours, the creature returned to the forest. The women were in shock and traumatized for weeks. The attack on the Searcy family's house was also documented by the local police. Throughout the entire year of 1971, the creature was sighted in the swamps and forests of Miller County. Dozens of locals reported that the monster had killed livestock and other large animals, often dogs. In one case, a farmer stated that he saw the creature carrying off 2 of his 100-pound hogs with little effort, leaping a fence with a hog tucked under each arm. Meanwhile, the small village of Fouke was about to turn into a chaotic frenzy of spectators, monster hunters, and journalists. Local radio stations and newspapers set up bounties for the monster. In late 1971, Charles B. Pierce started to film The Legend of Boggy Creek at the original locations in and around Fouke, at the peak of the frenzy. The small village gained a questionable regional fame, and many local and regional hunters and tourists went on monster hunts into the forests and swamps along Boggy Creek and the Sulphur River bottoms. It is said that the tracking dogs often refused to follow tracks into the swamps and were scared off by scents emanating from the boggy marshlands. Another local family notably associated with the folklore surrounding the Fouke monster is the Crabtree family. Residents of the swamps around Fouke for many generations, the family was aware of the strange man-like monster many years before the wider public heard of it. Many family members had sightings or run-ins with the creature. Shots were fired at the beast more than once. Especially Smokey Crabtree and his son Travis Crabtree, who were both featured in The Legend of Boggy Creek, are nowadays associated with the monster. Smokey Crabtree researched the monster for the rest of his life and stayed a significant figure in the folklore surrounding Boggy Creek until his death in 2016. Another fascinating but merely mentioned aspect of the story of the Fouke monster is the fact that through the years, many people also reported seeing smaller, juvenile-looking creatures, clearly indicating that the monster is not a singular entity, but most likely a clan or tribe of cryptids living in the swamps and wastelands of Miller County. The sightings of the Fouke monster in the Sulphur River bottoms and along Boggy Creek have never stopped, with encounters documented from the 1970s until today, including multiple reports made in 2024. Let's listen to an audio recording made along a branch of Boggy Creek on an evening in the summer of 2023. The description of the Fouke monster has remained constant through the decades. It is described as a 7 to 8 foot tall, 300 to 500 pound hair-covered hominid that emanates a foul smell. The blood-curdling screams and the red eyes of the creature are also described in numerous encounters. The village of Fouke has accepted its questionable fame over time. Today, an annual monster festival is held in Fouke. Also, the local supermarket became the Monster Mart, a well-known focal point for cryptid researchers and monster hunters in the region. The 1972 movie, The Legend of Boggy Creek, is a cult movie in the Bigfoot community today, and might very well still be the commercially most successful Bigfoot movie ever. Many sequels followed the original movie. Join Squatch Mafia at Patreon to watch Return to Boggy Creek and Boggy Creek 2 by Charles B. Pierce himself. along many other Bigfoot movies and documentaries. Various books on the Fouke monster were written over the decades. The most informative might be the autobiographical Smokey and the Fouke Monster by Smokey Crabtree, and also The Beast of Boggy Creek by cryptid researcher Lyle Blackburn, from which many of the informations in this video were taken. The monster itself remains a mystery, but it is of course just one of many examples of Bigfoot or skunk ape-like creatures of the southern United States. Similar but less known stories are coming from Florida to Texas for more than 150 years. Also, native legends and folklore on hair-covered man-like giants can be found from the Esti Kapkaki of the Seminole tribe in the swamps of Florida to the Caddo creature of East Texas. Noteworthy modern-day folklore from the southern states include, for example, the saga of the Myakka skunk ape, or the previously mentioned Honey Island swamp monster. You can also find a video on the Myakka skunk ape on this channel. See the links in the video description below. What is your opinion on the Fouke monster and the legend of Boggy Creek? Have you experienced something strange in the swamps of southern Arkansas? Let me know in the comments. Hit the like button if you have enjoyed this episode of Bigfoot Territory. Subscribe to the Squatch Mafia channel at YouTube for more videos on Bigfoot and Sasquatch. Check out Squatch Mafia at Patreon and TikTok for extra content. Thank you for watching.